Yahoo Sports Fantasy Football Live is presented by Planters, State Farm, and Crown Royal.
Good morning and welcome to week 6 of the NFL. This is Fantasy Football Live. I'm Liz Loza, and joining me in our virtual studio is the usual Sunday morning crew. We got Andy Behrens in Chicago, Matt Harmon in Los Angeles, Tank Williams in San Francisco, and betting analyst Minty Betts live from Las Vegas. It has definitely been an interesting few weeks. Lots of injuries, some schedule changes, but it looks like we will get all games in as scheduled this week. Who are you hoping finally catches fire on your fantasy teams? Andy, start us off.
Oh, I need DJ Chark to play today. I have so much exposure to the Jacksonville-Detroit game. I need anything from Chark in this one, in part because the one bad game that Gardner Minshew had this season was the game that Chark missed, and I need Minshew to do something, anything.
Matt, what about you?
Oh, I mean, I was looking at some of my teams this morning, and, I was ahead of the market on offenses like the Seahawks and the Chargers. That's been great so far. Those teams are like 4-1, but the bill has come due this week with both those teams on bye. I'm talking about the waiver wire special starting lineups in a few leagues. So you know what? Maybe I'll just take like a personal bye this week. I'm not going to look at those teams for the rest of the day.
Well, I mean, that seems to be a trend this year, so you wouldn't be alone. Tank, what about you? Who are you hoping lights it up?
Hey, I need my boys down in Nashville to continue to tighten up. I have a heavy dose of Derrick Henry across all my lineups, and so dealing with, them missing games with COVID, dealing with Ryan Tannehill running in touchdowns instead of handing off to Henry, I just need Henry to give me one of those 175-yard games and like 3 tubs, and then I'll be good.
Nashville needs to tighten up and mask up, maybe. Minty, what trends are you seeing at the sportsbook this morning?
All these injuries, will they play, will they not play? I mean, it's just so hard to keep track of it, but everything seems good. I've placed my bets for the day, and hopefully I can share some winners with everyone here.
Share that love. I know for me, I have had Damian Harris stashed for weeks. I mean, in some leagues I drafted in July, and I'm relieved that this game versus Denver is finally happening, and I'm hoping to see Harris build on the 100-yard effort that he had back in Week 4. Do you remember Week 4? Feels like a lifetime ago. Anyway, don't forget, we are here to help you get those lineups set. So send your roster questions on Twitter at Yahoo Fantasy using the AskFFL hashtag, or you can drop a question in the chat and we'll try to answer as many as we can on the show. Plus, our own Scott Pianowski is responding to questions live on Twitter as we speak, so fire away. Let's turn our attention to the injury report and get some updates now. First, the players who have already been ruled out. Melvin Gordon will miss week 6 with an illness. Dalvin Cook, Deontay Johnson, and Sammy Watkins are all dealing with injuries and will not suit up this week. Meanwhile, some highly rostered players returning from injury this week include Packers receiver Devontae Adams, Tampa Bay's Chris Godwin, Julio Jones is back this week for Atlanta. We'll see how back he is. And Zach Moss will return to the backfield in Buffalo. And the latest from the actives-inactives list, Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry both listed as questionable for today's tilt, with the Steelers are expected to play per Adam Schefter. Jags receiver DJ Chark, this is news for you, Andy, is nursing that ankle injury. The team tested the ankle this morning, and it appears that he is good to go. Also, Leonard Fournette expected to return for the Bucs backfield today, although he could be a little bit limited with his ankle injury. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions about Ronald Jones.
All right, first over-under of the day, and we are looking to the Sunday night matchup between the Rams and Niners. We're looking at that Rams backfield. Darrell Henderson, 15.5 touches. I will start us off here, and I got to take the under on this one. I realize that he's actually reached this total in 2 of his last 3 games, coming off a game in which he saw 15 carries, but those carries only went for 38 yards. Over his last 2, he's averaging just 2.6 yards per carry. That's not necessarily getting it done for fantasy managers. I understand it's a bye week, it's a messy bye week, maybe you don't have other options. I'm just concerned here that Cam Akers gets more involved because he's actually started 2 games this season. He's healthy right now, and he was great in garbage time last week. Hank, do you agree?
I'm with you, Red, because the last time I stood up for this guy, Sean McVay had me looking like Boo Boo the Fool. And as you said, he had 18 touches last week. But at the same time, the only thing that's different between a couple weeks ago and now is that Cam Akers is now in the mix. And Sean McVay, you never know how the wind's going to blow at that guy. He can't stick to running back. And I have a feeling that it could be a Malcolm Brown day. It could be, a Cam Akers day. So for that fact, I'm not saying that Darrell Henderson isn't going to get off, but you have to be limited with your expectations because Sean McVay is the wild card. So under.
Minty, can we sweep it?
Yes, we can sweep it. He's going up against the Niners, who are pretty fierce against the run, allowing only 3.8 yards per attempt. I think Jared Goff is going to sling that ball around to his wideouts instead this game, so under is the play.
There it is. It's a sweep. We are in lockstep.
Let's turn our attention to some surprisingly great picks presented by State Farm, just like State Farm has surprisingly great rate. These players have the potential to shock the fantasy world with a game-changing performance, and they're under 25% started this week. I'm going to get us rolling here with Lions receiver Marvin Jones, who has caught all of 12 passes this year, which has been quite a bit of a letdown considering that people had hopes he was going to bounce back after an injury last year. But I think this is a good week to start Marvin Jones because, listen, unless he's like totally cooked, I think this is a good spot for him against the Jacksonville Jaguars defense that's 32nd in passing success rate allowed. And here's the key. Jones has been on the field. He has been involved in the offense. He has run a route on 96% of Matt Stafford's dropbacks. Now, they're not popping off in terms of the deep passing game they are in Detroit. We know last year Stafford was like leading the league in air yards when he was playing. That's not been the case this year, but I think this is a nice spot for the entire passing game to get right against a really bad Jags defense. Liz, who do you got under 25% this week?
Well, I am targeting the exact same matchup. I want to talk about Laviska Shenault, the rookie. Now, obviously, I like this pick a little bit more when DJ Chark looked like he wasn't going to play, but I still think when you take into consideration Chenault's versatility, can line up all over the field, he's getting about 2 on average backfield touches per week, and his ability after the catch, he already has 136 yards after the catch. That's top 9 among wide receivers. I think that he can still sneak into the top 30 producers at the position, especially when you consider the matchup, which is absolutely juicy, and the fact that Chark is not 100%.
I like that call. We've seen rookie wide receivers pop up. Like each week, it's a new guy. Maybe this is the Shenault week. Now I'm going to go back to the dusty veteran well here, and I'm going to take Randall Cobb, who is the clear number 3 Texans receiver. He's third on the teams with 137 routes run, but it's not a massive gap between him and Will Fuller at number 2. Cobb has been plenty involved. We've seen him have at least one ceiling game and a few floor games. And here's the key. I really think this Titans-Texans matchup is going to be more high scoring than people think. I like both of these offenses, especially now that the Texans have exercised the Bill O'Brien demon and they're playing loose, they're playing fast, they're playing free. A lot more play action in their first game without Bill O'Brien last week. I think that can favor Randall Cobb, who's got a pretty decent matchup. The Titans allow almost 13 yards per catch to slot receivers, which is pretty unique considering that's more of the bunny hop receiver position. So keep an eye on those players. And when you want the real deal, remember, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Let's check in with social media for the first time this morning and answer some of those roster questions. Don't forget to send your questions to the hashtag AskFFL. Our first tweet comes from Jaywalk22. You'll get a ticket in Los Angeles for doing that. Gardner Minshew or Andy Dalton? Andy, not of the Dalton variety, although we do have a Dalton Del Don. How weird. I never thought about that. Why don't you answer this one? Which of these 2 quarterbacks are you taking?
Yeah, this is one of those situations where I actually need the answer to be Gardner Minshew. But if I had Andy Dalton available to me in those leagues, I think I would go Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, while he's obviously not Dak Prescott, he doesn't have that rushing element, doesn't have that upside, is still going to benefit from some of the same situations that were helping Prescott, right? He's got an incredible receiving core, arguably the best that he's ever had. And his defense is so bad they allowed 34 points to the New York Giants, so he's going to have to try to stay ahead of them all season long. I don't hate the matchup this week against Arizona. I think Dalton's just in a great spot, and volume is never going to be an issue. I worry a little bit, again, about that Chark issue this week, so slight lean to Andy Dalton for me.
I have a feeling we're going to answer a lot of Andy Dalton questions this week, but let's get to our next question, which is from Press, and he wants to know, I'm going to throw this one to you, Tank, Justin Jefferson or Juju Smith-Schuster?
Oh, man. I mean, actually, those are two really good options. That's kind of tough. I mean, I would look at it from this perspective where Juju is supposed to be the #1 guy in Pittsburgh. Claypool just got off last week, and so I expect Ben Roethlisberger to target Juju more than any of those other guys. So I'd probably go Juju in the spot, even though I got to admit, like Justin Jefferson, I love him this week going against that Falcons defense. Everyone expected him to really perform well against Seattle. Had an off game. Some people may get off on him because of that, but he's set up to just blow up this week. So you won't go wrong with either of those guys, but I'll probably lean Juju.
All right, Matt, this next one is going to you, and get ready to repress that gag reflex because it's a little bit stomach churning. Abby wants to know, for the flex spot, Adrian Peterson, Hayden Hurst, or Rex Burkhead?
Ay, Abby. All right. Well, I guess we're going to go Adrian Peterson here. Like, I would hope that the Lions, coming off their bye week and like an actual normal scheduled bye week, which is different here in 2020, would have like been a little introspective, looked themselves in the mirror and said, hey, maybe we should, throw the ball down the field because we've got some good receivers, we've got a nice young tight end and a quarterback who's always been underrated, instead of running their offense through a 30-plus-year-old running back, but maybe not. And it's probably better than starting Rex Burkhead, who's like one of 9 running backs in that Patriots backfield, and I just don't think Hayden Hurst is in a great position to do. So I guess I'd go Peterson. And yeah, I managed to make it all the way through without vomiting. So that's a win for me.
Congratulations. Andy, we talked about Adrian Peterson on the podcast. This next question is another backfield query. It's from Coco Bear 61. He wants to know what's up with the Arizona running backs. I mean, we've been saying that all year, right? Should I start Chase Edmonds or Kenyon Drake? The coin flip continues. What say you? Is Chase going to finally leapfrog Kenyon Drake, or did last week's touchdown for Drake maybe right the ship a bit?
Yeah, I'm going to take the old fantasy expert hedge here and say that it comes down to what your scoring format is, because it really does come down to what your scoring format is. Edmonds has been heavily involved as a receiver for that team. He's like 3rd on the team in targets, I think 23 so far in the season, and Drake has not. Drake has 0 role as a receiver for that team. 6 targets so far on the year. Yes, it's a friendly matchup against Dallas, and yes, I think Drake is going to get a few more touches. But Edmonds hasn't been coming off the field necessarily when they get inside of the goal line, so I think he's a pretty good bet to find the end zone in a shootout of a matchup. So again, I lean Edmonds in any sort of PPR, and I'm going to go Drake in a standard.
Well, there you have it. It is time for our first break here on Fantasy Football Live. When we come back, NFL analyst Mina Kimes joins Tank in our virtual tailgate. Don't you go away.
Don't overthink it. Go with your guys and our gut. Take a Crown Royal water break and trust that your lineup is about to go off.
Welcome to the Crown Royal Water Break with ESPN NFL analyst and social media wordsmith, Mina Kimes. Howdy, Mina. Thanks for hopping on to talk a little fantasy football with me.
Thank you for having me. I need a hat that says Mina on it. Now
right?
You're working it, yeah.
All right, now we're going to talk Jets Dolphins. I mean, we have to start off with this. I mean, the Jets let go of Le'Veon Bell. Sam Darnold's already ruled out for this week, and now they got to go on the road down to South Beach against a Dolphins team that just mollywopped the 49ers in Santa Clara. Like, should we just make it rain Dolphins this week?
I'm going to really do my best to avoid watching this game, to be honest, Hank. But from a fantasy perspective, on the Jets side, I would stay away from just about everyone. The Dolphins, not only has their offense been rolling with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but their defense has looked better. Getting Byron Jones back in that secondary was huge, which makes me feel even worse about the Jets skill players than I already did, if that's possible.
Gotcha. Now, next up is OBJ against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this dude set off rocket emojis against the Dallas Cowboys a couple weeks ago, and now he goes up against the Pittsburgh Steelers team that's given up the 10th most points to fantasy wide receivers, but Baker Mayfield has the bruised up ribs, and man, we know Blitzburg can get after the quarterback. So, can OBJ keep the party going against the Steelers?
I think so. The Steelers defense, let me rephrase that. The Steelers front seven is terrifying. But when they don't get home, Tank, that secondary has not been playing to the level that they did last year, which is why you're seeing wide receivers produce against them. Meanwhile, I love the Browns' offensive line. I know it's not sexy in a fantasy conversation to talk about pass protection, but the pass protection in Cleveland has been awesome. So I think Baker's going to go to OBJ early and often. He might not be going to him deep because he's going to get the ball out quickly. But if anyone can get yards after the catch, it's Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Now, last we have the Green Bay Packers going down to face Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Rodgers and Brady, I mean, people kind of underestimated these guys coming into the season, but both of them have been playing lights out, yet they have tough matchups this week. Tampa Bay gives up the 6th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Green Bay gives up the 7th fewest. So if you had to choose out of those two quarterbacks, who you got?
This is a hard one. It's going to be a great game, by the way. But I think the Bucs defense, from a non-fantasy, just a football perspective, is much better than Green Bay. But I'm still rolling with Rodgers because while Tom's been good, Rodgers is playing at an MVP level, and it doesn't matter who's on the field. You saw that. No Devontae Adams, no Allen Lazard, no problem. Him and Matt LaFleur, they are clicking together, and I think even against the Bucs defense, they're going to come out with a game plan that gets the ball in the hands of those Green Bay playmakers.
Now, besides getting Pittsburgh Steelers fans riled up about Big Ben's deep ball, how are you virtually tailgating this season with Crown Royal?
Well, you know, Tank, I love wings, and I can't make them myself. So since I'm not going to the sports bar, I'll often have them delivered to my house. I would say just for lunch, but that would be a lie. I eat them for lunch and dinner on Sundays. And then, you know, when I'm home, if I'm drinking Crown Royal, I make sure to take water breaks. I drink a lot of water all day. Gets me through all of football Sunday.
Well, as you said, Crown Royal is the perfect addition to your game day, but don't forget to stay hydrated and drink responsibly. Thanks for joining us, Mina.
Thanks for having me.
That was a Crown Royal water break. Moderate your drinking on game day. Stay hydrated and stay royal.
All right, let's jump into our fantasy face-off where we take two similarly ranked players and we duke it out. With 20 seconds on the clock here, Tank, we're gonna jump right into it with a quarterback conversation. We're gonna go Jared Goff versus Gardner Minshew. Tell me why you like Jared Goff here.
Well, the 49ers defense is giving up the 12th most points to fantasy quarterbacks, and as we saw last week, my man Fitzmagic came through Santa Clara and beat the Niners down, and that secondary is still beat up. Sherman's not coming back. They've actually given up 2 rushing touchdowns this year, and Jared Goff has actually run for 2 touchdowns, so this game is either going to be ugly or a shootout, and I'm banking on a shootout, so Goff should get off.
I like that call, but give me Gardner Minshew just a little bit ahead of Jared Goff. And I think the key here is DJ Chark is going to be playing, even if Chark is not 100%, even if he's not totally involved in the offense. I think his presence on the field opens things up. He's that type of receiver, especially from a vertical perspective. Love Laviska Shenault in this game. I think all of these guys together can bring a pretty good performance for Gardner Minshew against a Matt Patricia defense in Detroit that can't rush the passer and cannot cover. All right, let's move on to our next position. We got running backs here, and oh boy, what an exciting debate between Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson. I'll get it. Yeah, awesome. I'll get us started here with Mark Ingram. Look, the Ravens committee is completely unpredictable. There's been no rhyme or reason to this backfield split. I know I'm selling this really hard right now. But let's look on the other side of it with Adrian Peterson. Well, I just saw a tweet from Tom Pelissero not long ago. This guy's getting blood work this week. They thought he had an appendix issue. Yikes, what's all that about? At least Mark Ingram's got a functioning appendix. And I do expect the Ravens to be able to control the action in this game. And maybe they get back to their rushing route in this spot. But Tank, tell me why I'm wrong and Adrian Peterson is the play here.
Bruh, even with an appendix injury, I would still take Adrian Peterson over Mark Ingram because the simple fact, like Adrian Peterson, last time he touched the field for Detroit, at least he got 22 carries. The lead dog for Baltimore is Lamar Jackson, and we don't even know if Ingram is second after that because you have to deal with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. The Jags are giving up the 8th most points to fantasy running backs, and we don't even know if Ingram's going to pinch the field. So that boy, Old Man River, going to get off today. Well, at least more than Mark Ingram would.
All right, look, you don't want to start either of these dusty running backs anyways, so let's move it on. Let's find out about some actual good plays here in the flex.
All right, time for a little Make Your Pick where we take your social questions. Let's start with one from El Padrino. It's a half PPR league, and this is simple. We only need to sit one of these. Chase Claypool, CeeDee Lamb, Robert Woods, or Antonio Gibson. I like them all. There's not really anybody I want to sit here, so I will kick it to you, Liz.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I think the big fantasy story we have to mention is Chase Claypool, who not only raised his profile last week, but should maintain a raised profile with Deontay Johnson out again in week 6. I'm going to go with Chase Claypool in this one. I'm going to go with Robert Woods against San Francisco. Tank talked about the secondary for the 49ers not being healthy and being flammable. And then the question is, do we sit CeeDee Lamb in this potential shootout with Andy Dalton, or do we sit Antonio Gibson? I'm actually going to sit CeeDee Lamb because I like Antonio Gibson's usage in the red area of the field, and I think there's just a better shot of a touchdown.
Yeah, I think maybe the deciding factor there, it's a PPR format, and they are just peppering those running backs in Washington with targets because they need to keep the heat off of them, right? The offensive line play has been terrible, so I think there's a lot of receptions in store for Gibson. Let's move on to our next question, which comes to us from Matt. It is also a half PPR. Needs to Mecole Hardman. Oh, fun matchup there. Joe Mixon, Chase Edmonds. This one's really close for me. Not at the top. I'm going to go Joe Mixon here. It's a tough matchup against Indy. But the thing that has kind of saved Joe Mixon from a fantasy perspective lately is all of a sudden they're throwing to him. It was our biggest complaint early in the year, but now over the last 2 weeks, he's seen 14 targets. That's great to see. He always needed to be a big part of the receiving game for that team. And then I'm going to lean Mecole Hardman here just for the home run potential. No Sammy Watkins this week should lead to enhanced opportunities for Hardman. I think the upside there is 1, maybe 2 touchdowns. Do you disagree?
No, I absolutely agree. I think you're going for the ceiling play, which you have to do when you're considering Hardman, and also noting the fact that Darius Leonard is banged up for Indy, which should make things a bit easier for Mixon.
Good call. Next question that we have is from Tony. Wants us to pick 2. It's a non-PPR. Chris Godwin, OBJ, CeeDee Lamb, who you've already picked against, Marquise Brown, or Julian Edelman. Okay, Liz, pick 2 of those.
Well, we're mentioning, of course, that this is non-PPR, right? So who has the best shot at a touchdown? Mina Kimes mentioned, rightfully so, OBJ's ability to get lit after the catch, but there's a lot of obstacles before he is able to do that, especially with Baker banged up and the guard on the O-line banged up, and the matchup. So I think the best shots at touchdowns here are Chris Godwin. I'm not too worried about re-aggravating the hamstring injury, and Marquise Brown, even though Darius Slay, by the way, has been cleared of the concussion protocol and is expected to play.
Yeah, I like it. Super vulnerable Philadelphia defense. I like Hollywood Brown. They've been so close on a couple of big strikes between Lamar and Brown so far. Okay, last one here comes to us from Todd. It's a half PPR, needs a wide receiver and a flex. Chris Godwin, again an option. A.J. Brown, Tyler Boyd, Antonio Gibson. There's not a single option here that I don't like, but I'm going to lean to the first two, actually. I'm going to go Chris Godwin for the reasons that Liz just went through, and I'm going to go A.J. Brown, who is finally healthy, an emerging star. One of the things that we like about that Tennessee offense, it's such a narrow usage tree there. They're throwing to Jonnu, they're throwing to A.J. Brown, and not many other players, and Tannehill has been great, basically the same as he was last year. Any disagreement here?
No, I have the exact same notes. Also just wanted to mention that Corey Davis has yet to be activated off of the COVID list. So the passing tree remains very narrow, which we love.
There it is. Keep sending in those questions. Use the hashtag AskFFL.
Every week I file a recap column on Sunday night late. Sunday night, and thank you for all the lunatics who read it that late, about the things that I care and do not care about coming out of the Sunday action. Well, let's talk about what I don't care about coming into this week. And I've had a lot of time to marinate on it because the last time we saw a football game was on Tuesday night when the Tennessee Titans took it to the Buffalo Bills. And I don't care about you people and your preconceived notions about this Titans team, because guess what? It is past time to respect this Titans passing offense. Ryan Tannehill last year, it's amazing we have to have this conversation because last year, Ryan Tannehill, among a variety of efficiency metrics, led the NFL in adjusted yards per attempt at 10.2. I think it was simply the fact that he combined for 160 total passing yards between the Titans' two playoff games that the nationally televised audience was watching, and they're like, oh, he's just a bit player along for the ride. Not at all, and it especially has not been the case through the first few weeks of this season. The Titans right now rank 16th in Football Outsiders rushing DVOA and efficiency metrics from a rushing offense perspective, but they're 5th in terms of their passing game. Right now, they're winning games by being a pass-first team. And what's beautiful about this offense, I know Andy just mentioned it, it is a truncated tree here. We pretty much know where the ball is going in this offense. It's going to A.J. Brown or it's going to Jonnu Smith. And those two guys, I think, are both emerging superstars. I mean, A.J. Brown at this point, he reminds me of like an Andre Johnson type talent. I think he's going to be that type of elite number one wide receiver. When he's back there, he changes things from a passing game perspective. And hey, Jonnu Smith, like if he played for the Packers or, you know, one of these other high flying offenses that threw the ball a ton, we'd be talking about him as like a clear top 4, top 5 fantasy tight end. So I love this offense. It's time we give them the respect that they deserve. I don't care about your preconceived notions. Yes, I love Derrick Henry. We all love Derrick Henry. We should all be on the Derrick Henry train. But it's time for the passing game to get the same respect that Henry does from a national perspective and play all these guys in daily fantasy, please. They're still undervalued because the game happened late this week. We love it. Stack them up with the Texans and enjoy such a beautifully underrated passing game.
Let's head to the sportsbook to make some money with a few player props we like from BetMGM.com. Andy, kick us off.
Yeah, I'm looking at a player prop on Mark Ingram. I know Matt kind of sort of endorsed him earlier, not really, not fully. The yardage total in this one, 44.5 rush yards. I have Mark Ingram in a ton of leagues, and I would go ahead and take this right now because he doesn't usually do it. He's only reached this total twice this season. His single game high in rushing yards this year is 57. The rushing yards just haven't been, the carries haven't been there. He's only averaging 9 carries a week, has never exceeded 11 in any game. This is an enormously productive rushing offense. It averages over 160 rushing yards per game, but it hasn't produced even a top 35 fantasy back. So I can't expect more than, say, 40 yards from Ingram in this one. I want the under on 44.5.
Minty, which player and prop has caught your eye?
I'm going with Todd Gurley. He's at 56.5 rushing yards. I like the over here as he's exceeded 56 rushing yards in basically all the games this season. And he's going up against the Vikings, who ranked bottom 10th in rush defense. So give me the over for this one.
All right, well, both of my colleagues chose running back, so why not stay in line? I'm going to go with David Montgomery over 59.5 rushing yards. Now, I understand that he's rushed for under 30 yards in back-to-back contests. He's also averaging a true YPC of 3.9, but when we look at those last two matchups, that was against Indianapolis and Tampa Bay. Those are two top 10 run defenses. The Carolina Panthers, well, that's a bottom 10 run defense. And they also lost K'Wan Short for the year. I think Montgomery should be able to do this. And you know what? Today is Coach Ditka's birthday, so give me the over. If you feel like taking a chance on any of these player props, sign up today at betmgm.com/Yahoo. New users will receive a 100% match up to $1,000 when you make your first deposit. Must be over 21 and in New Jersey, Colorado, Indiana, or West Virginia. Terms apply. Time for another break here on Fantasy Football Live. Coming up, we'll see which players are trending and check back in with the honorable Judge Barons, who rules on some pretty ridiculous trade terms. And we are back here on season 15 of FFL. While you were gone, we were keeping an eye on the social conversation. Here are the top trending players on social media: Darius Slayton, DJ Moore, Laviska Shenault, Mecole Hardman. We have already discussed Shenault and Hardman, so let's talk about Darius Slayton. There was some question as to whether or not he'd be available for Week 6 because he had only practiced on a limited basis dealing with a foot injury, but he is active. He's had 40 targets over 5 games. How Matt, are you ranking Slayton?
Yeah, I think he's a fine wide receiver 3 play that you can accept some volatility in your lineup. Like, he's an okay bet simply because, like, at this point, he's probably the one guy that you can expect any sort of consistent chemistry with Daniel Jones. I mean, Jones is like good for a turnover per game. Like, you want to talk about your lock of the week? Jones fumbling it or throwing a pick, that's your lock. It's pretty much been the case ever since he got in the NFL. But at the same time, while he's putting them behind the 8 ball there, maybe if Washington can actually control this game a little bit, it should get into a decent back and forth with, two defenses that haven't played all that well in the secondary outside of James Bradbury. Gotta give respect to Bradbury. So I think that's kind of how you have to approach Slayton. Like, he's a volatile guy, but this still looks like a decent spot against some cornerbacks where he can get success.
Tank, let's talk about DJ Moore. Last week we discussed Robbie Anderson ad nauseum, right? Because he seems to be the wide receiver one in Carolina, despite the fact that heading into the season we all thought it would be Moore. But then last week, Moore found the end zone for the first time. So how are you treating this receiving core?
I think we still know that Robbie Anderson is that dude in Carolina. I think with my fantasy lineup last week, I projected DJ Moore to be one of those value guys that you can plug in that really good matchup against the Falcons, and he produced. But now you're going against the Chicago Bears, where they're giving up the second fewest points to wide receiver position. And so in a game where I expect both teams to lean heavily on the running backs and where he's not the number one guy, I think that you should temper your expectations for him to have another blowout spot. This just isn't the week in the matchup for it.
All right, well, I have a question about Mecole Hardman for you two. Let's stand. Obviously, the Kansas City game is one of the most anticipated. It has the highest expected point total at 57.5, I believe, per BetMGM. So, Mecole Hardman, how are we feeling about his touchdown potential without Sammy Watkins in the lineup?
You got to love it, right? Like, this is, if you drafted Mecole Hardman, this is your moment. This is what you were waiting for. Like, this had to happen pretty much for him to have any projectable, like, consistent value on a week-to-week basis. I think the guy's legit good. And look, I know the Chiefs offense hasn't totally clicked yet, but they started to get it working from a deep passing game perspective last week. And I love how we say, like, the Chiefs offense isn't clicking just yet, and it's still one of the best offenses in the NFL, but we know that potential is even higher. And I love this game environment too, with the Bills and the Chiefs. A lot of high scoring potential.
And Tank, we know how I feel about Laviska Shenault. We know how Matt feels about Laviska Shenault and the Titans passing game as a whole. In this contest, with DJ Chark on the field but not 100%, over under 80 total yards, knowing that he gets some backfield touches for the rookie.
Actually, I think this is a good spot for him. You're going against the Lions defense, teams have had some success against them. DJ Chark is not 100%. I like the fact that he had 8 targets last week against the Texans, and you know that he's going to get the gadget plays. He's going to get a couple carries in the run game potentially. And so when you have an offense where the offensive coordinator is trying to get the ball in this young man's hands as many ways as possible, I like his prospects for, at least having a decent floor, and then the upside is going to be through the roof just because that game could be a sneaky shootout as well.
Rousing conversation, gentlemen. Thank you. We'll keep everyone up to date on all of the social media buzz, and be sure to drop some comments in the chat, and we'll get more questions very soon.
Yeah, all right. It is I, the finest legal mind in fantasy, taking your questions with some of the finest fake hair in fantasy as well. I don't normally take a lot of trade proposal questions, but I got a bizarre one this week from Justin, and he acknowledges that it's the craziest thing he's seen, quite possibly the craziest fantasy deal offered to me by a fellow league manager. I get Tyreek Hill, and I have to bench my kicker and defense on 3 random weeks of his choosing for the regular season. Thoughts? My first thought is a little bit of grudging admiration for the inventiveness and the total underhandedness of this trade offer. But my second thought, when I recover from that, is absolute outrage at anyone who wants someone else to deliberately set a trash lineup. This is not an acceptable thing to trade for, clearly. The list of acceptable trade pieces, in my view, in any fantasy league, regardless of format, it's going to be players. I can trade a player for a player. I can trade a player for a pick, for a future draft pick. Or maybe I can trade a player for fab resources, right? A few dollars that I can throw at the waiver wire. But that's it. There's no other stuff that I can trade for. I can't trade for a package of car washes. I can't trade for gift certificates at a local restaurant. I can't trade for the guarantee of future fantasy losses against an opponent. This is entirely underhanded. Look, fair play in fantasy generally depends on everyone setting lineups and making decisions that are for the benefit of their team, either short-term or long-term. And we can't have this level of underhandedness. This would bother me to no end if I was involved in the league. And I thought that maybe I missed out on a playoff spot because something like this was going on. So what we need here is for the commissioner to step in and actually define what can be traded for. Now, this is something that a normal commissioner wouldn't have to do, but you obviously have some villainous people in your league here. And I think it also requires that the commissioner go back and do maybe a little fantasy forensics and figure out if this guy has ever done something like that before and maybe retroactively change those lineups. But at a minimum, if they're trying this, and certainly if it's ever gone through, commissioner has to step in and penalize them, either some fab resources and or draft position or a draft pick. But this sort of trade offer has to be punished.
Yeah, I just want to say, for the record, I disagree with Andy. If anyone wants to trade me any coupons for any of my fake fantasy players, please hit me up at @MattHarmon_BYB on Twitter. Now, let's move on to some serious business here. We got to talk some more Mecole Hardman, all right? We're doing our second set of over-unders. This guy is the player of the week, apparently. We're talking about him all the way here. The line here is 11.9 fantasy points, half PPR, the Yahoo standard. And I'm going to get us started here, and I am going to go over. And one of the biggest reasons I'm doing it, not to mention I already just talked about him felt like 5 seconds ago, and I said he's in play because of the lineup designation here with Sammy Watkins out. But last week, the Raiders slowed down the Chiefs' passing game by not blitzing a ton. Patrick Mahomes was only blitzed on 2 attempts. That sort of slowed down the passing game, allowed the Raiders to get an advantage. The Bills, though, they blitz almost more than any team in the NFL. I don't think they're going to be able to control themselves. I don't think they're introspective. So give me the over here on this one. Minty, do you agree with Mr. Mecole Hardman, the player of the week here, going over on this line?
I'm not as high on Mecole Hardman as you guys are. I mean, okay, look, this season he's only had a high of 4 receptions, no higher than 81 receiving yards, and he's only recorded 2 touchdowns all season long. I think the ball is going to find the hands of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce more than Hardman, so give me the under. Sorry.
Can't argue with you siding with Hill and Kelce, 2 obviously great players. Tank, though. Come on. I know you want to be on the right side of history here with Mecole Hardman.
Yeah, you know I'm with you, dog. I'm going with the over. I mean, this is one of those things where we just have to project out to see what we think is going to happen. Like, this dude played 70% of the snaps last week. He actually played more snaps than our man Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's also going to have Le'Veon Bell competing with him for snaps here shortly. But I love the matchup. All the teams are going to be doing is focusing on Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, which means that Mecole Hardman should be able to eat in the middle of that field. And so I'm just looking forward to this dude balling out and just being able to sit on my couch and say, I'm Mecole Hardman. Me love you long time.
Well, on that note, let's keep it moving here. Maybe we should do an over-under on how many more times we're going to hear about Mecole Hardman on this show.
All right, well, after that, let's turn our attention to our picks who will be off their game this week. These are players who are more than 50% started in Yahoo leagues, but could be a bust in week 6. Andy, tell me who you're fading.
I have a completely gutless call here. I'm going to admit that right at the top. I'm going with Zach Ertz. And we could argue that in order to be eligible for off their game, someone should have to have been on their game at some point in the season. It just hasn't really happened for Zach Ertz. He's still seeing plenty of work, right? He's seeing 7 targets per game. He is doing nothing with them. Appears to be lifeless. Single-digit yardage totals over each of the past 2 weeks. And the matchup this week, it's bad. It's Baltimore. Obviously, that's a fierce front 7. Baltimore on the season as a whole, allowing the fewest points per game, total points per game in the NFL. So it's a bad spot for him. I see no touchdown upside. Only Travis Kelce among all tight ends has gone over 60 receiving yards against this team. So no thanks on Zach Ertz this week.
Good stat there for Baltimore. Wow. Tank, Who do you have, and tell us why the advice Andy and I gave earlier in the show is wrong?
Well, first I gotta go at Rev's neck for throwing that Stanford shade at me right before I have to talk about Joe Mixon in this tough matchup he has against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, we'll get to Rev later, but you know, the Indianapolis Colts, they give up the 5th fewest points to fantasy running backs, and I understand that Darius Leonard is hurt, but another Stanford guy, Bobby Okereke, plays linebacker for the Colts, and he had like 10 tackles last week. Dude played well. You have to understand they held Kareem Hunt to about 3.7 yards per carry last week, and the only thing that saved his fantasy week last week was a passing reception, and so for a touchdown. So I feel that going against the Colts at home, coming off a tough loss against the Browns, I think that defense is going to stiffen up, play well, because you know you have to, because Phillip Rivers love to throw those interceptions. So Colts defense plays well, and they limit Joe Mixon's production today.
Oh, well, you cannot get Bobby Okereke takes anywhere but Fantasy Football Live. Thank you very much. You can probably get a lot of takes elsewhere, though, on wanting to fade Matt Ryan. As someone who has a lot of exposure to Matt Ryan, I'm doing it myself. In fact, I have him ranked one spot behind Andy Dalton. Since week 1 versus Seattle, by the way, Matt Ryan hasn't passed for over 285 yards, and he's only tossed 1 touchdown over his past 3 games. He has a red zone completion percentage of under 54%. Y'all, that is #bad. On paper, this matchup against the bottom 5 Vikings-ranked pass defense looks good, and maybe there's a shot that this team plays up for Raheem Morris. We have seen with Morris that exact thing happen, but when I think about Julio Jones not being 100% and Mike Zimmer's obsession with establishing the run, my faith in Matty Ice has gone cold. All right, now let's toss it over to Minty for her best bets for week 6.
All right, guys, welcome to Mad Bets. It's time for my picks for week 6. Let's start with the Packers versus the Bucks. The Packers are a 1-point road favorite, and they're coming off a bye week. They're 4-0 straight up and against the spread. The Bucks are going to have to step it up this game after losing to the Bears last week. I think this game is actually going to come down to the wire. I like the Packers money line at -125. Moving on to the Sunday night football game, we've got the Niners hosting the Rams. The Rams are a 3-point favorite in San Francisco. I don't need to talk about how good this Rams team is. The Niners, though, are struggling on both sides of the ball. I don't trust whoever's under center, and the Rams are 3-0-1 against the spread versus NFC West opponents. So give me the Rams on this short line. Let's move on to the Monday doubleheaders as the Bills host the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are a road favorite of 5 points. It is a lot, but we know they're good. This is a good bounce back spot for them because they lost to the Raiders last week. I'm not quite sold on the Bills yet, and the Chiefs are 4-1-1 against the spread on the road, so give me the Chiefs laying 5. And let's wrap it up with Monday Night Football as the Dallas Cowboys host the Arizona Cardinals. Cowboys are catching 1 point at home, and the Cardinals haven't won against a good team yet. I'm actually high on the Cowboys here. I know they're 0-5 against the spread, but as home underdogs, they're 4-0 straight up and against the spread, so give me the boys to upset the Cardinals. That wraps it up for my best bets this week. Be sure to follow us on Yahoo Sportsbook, on Twitter at Yahoo Sportsbook.
All right, let's jump into our chat room. Answer the people who are screaming into the void here, Tank. Let's jump into this. And remember, people, if you're watching, hit the chat room with the emojis so I know that it's a good question.
Yes.
If you don't have emojis, I'm not answering your question. That is the rules of this section. All right, we've got a very autumn-themed question here from Justin from Facebook. We've got a jack-o'-lantern, what looks like some pie, a nice hot drink. It's a flex and a half PPR. Myles Gaskin or Phillip Lindsay, who's probably going to draw the start here with Melvin Gordon out, Tank. Is this as easy as I think it is?
I think so. I mean, I'm going with Myles Gaskin in this one. I understand Phillip Lindsay is going to be playing, Melvin Gordon is out, but Gaskin has a really good matchup against the Jets, getting up the 3rd most fantasy points to RBs, and I really like this setup. I mean, obviously, Ryan Fitzpatrick has a good setup in this one as well, but I don't think the Jets offense is going to push them that much, which means that Gaskin should get a lot of carries in the run game as the Dolphins run the clock out from a lead. And so I expect him to go off this week, and, you know, he's really cheap in DFS too, just in case you're wondering.
Oh, I think the people are indeed wondering, Tank. And look, I was right. There were going to be more McCole Hardman talking points in this damn show. We got Brent Eby here in the chat with a jack-o'-lantern. We've got a football, very thematic. Love it, Brent. Well done. McCole Hardman or Jonnu Smith, Tank? I know you're a Titans guy. I think the answer here might sneaky be Jonnu Smith, even though I love McCole Hardman this week, as I've mentioned about 1,000 times on the show so far. Jonnu Smith is a guy who is a super big play potential guy. Like I said earlier, if he played on any other offense, I think he'd be like a clear top 4 tight end in fantasy. No shade on the Titans offense, just if there was more passing volume there. What do you think between these two exciting big play guys?
I mean, I love Jonnu Smith. I mean, I actually have Jonnu Smith on a couple of my teams, and he's been produced. I mean, he's like a top 5 fantasy tight end. If you look at him as far as overall points, I mean, like you said, he really doesn't get the number of targets that we like to see out of our high-end tight ends like Travis Kelce and those guys getting like in the mid-40s as far as targets. But, I mean, he's efficient, and he gets a lot of them in the red zone, and that's where it counts, and he makes the most of them. So I love Jonnu in this spot. And McCole Hardman, I think that he's an upside play that you throw in there if, you have him in the flex. But Jonnu is somebody that I've been dependent upon on a weekly basis, and for the most part, he's delivered.
Yeah, pretty much more projectable security there. With our guy, Jonnu Smith. Phil from Twitter sends in the mind-blowing emoji. And it's mind-blowing that Juju Smith-Schuster is in start-sit questions, but here's where we are at this point in the season. Phil wants to know, Will Fuller or Juju, 2 receivers I like this week, Tank. Which one of these guys would you play here if you had a choice?
I like Juju in this one. I think Juju going against the Browns, they give up the 3rd most points to fantasy wide receivers. Fuller's matchup really isn't that good. At the same time, I expect this Titans game against the Texans, that could be a sneaky shootout. I think that the Texans will play some inspired ball just for the simple fact that once B.O.B. gets fired, everyone has their head on the swivel because they feel like they're playing for their jobs. And I think they also really want to play for Romeo Crennel. At the same time, you got to go at the matchup. I think everyone's going to be focused on Claypool. Juju's going to be overlooked in a really good matchup. He should ball today.
Yeah, I like the Texans passing game against the Titans this week just because I think it's a good game environment, like you said. But, I mean, hey, it could be Brandon Cooks who goes off. It could be Randall Cobb who goes off. Those tight ends pop up every now and again. So I think I'd go with Juju. Also in a bit of a crowded passing game, but no Deontay Johnson, and the Browns give up the most yards to slot receivers in the NFL. All right, last one here from my guy Aaron from Facebook. I mean, he's not my guy, but sure, right now in this moment, you're my guy. You got a fire emoji. You've got what looks like a coffin. How morbid. And the siren emoji, a personal favorite here in this house. David Johnson, Todd Gurley, Chase Claypool. We need 2 of these guys here, Tank. Gurley, not exactly in the great matchup he was in last week. I mean, the Vikings aren't a very good run defense either. David Johnson, whatever. Chase Claypool, though, I'm not sitting Chase Claypool. I think I'd probably go Gurley over the 2 running backs. What do you think here?
I would go Gurley over David Johnson, and I'd probably go at Claypool. I mean, I just talked up Juju for the simple fact that I felt that the Browns would probably focus in on Claypool. At the same time, Juju has been their #1 wide receiver. They also have Eric Ebron, and the Browns have been terrible against the tight end, which could, make for a nice, sneaky Eric Ebron day. But Claypool, I mean, he has the hot hand. Big Ben loves him, and we know what he used to do at Antonio Brown. If he likes the guy, he continues to go to him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has another blow-up game. So I'll go with Gurley and Claypool in this situation.
Yeah, you and Mina talked about it earlier, Ben, and the deep ball's been a big question so far. Well, Claypool's the one deep threat on that offense, so keep an eye on that one. All right, time for another break, but when we come back, my man, Tank here, that is definitely my guy. Tank Williams, definitely my guy. He's going to offer his fantasy values, and we know Minty likes the Dallas Cowboys, but do we like Andy Dalton for fantasy purposes? Well, we'll debate that next.
All right, final over-under. We're looking at the Monday night game between Dallas and Arizona. Andy Dalton, a much-discussed player, 299.5 passing yards. Does he get to 300? I'm going to start us off and say over. I'm going to say that he gets there. Again, Andy Dalton is benefiting from the exact same situation that Dak had. Incredible receiving corps. Gallup, Cooper, Lamb, Schultz, Zeke out of the backfield. The great situation there. Also, his team's defense is about as bad as it gets. Just gave up 34 points to the New York Football Giants. He's going to have to try to pass to stay ahead of them. As much as they would like to be run heavy, I would think, in this one and for the remainder of the season, their defense simply won't allow it. I see a huge total number of attempts for Dalton coming up, and I think he creeps over 300 yards in this one. Liz, what say you?
This line is very interesting. I think we all, though, need to pew, 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 maybe pocket the red rifle for just a minute. Do I think that Andy Dalton can be a low-end QB1? Am I ranking him ahead of Matt Ryan? Yes. 300 passing yards? I'm not so sure. The Arizona Cardinals have yet to give up this yardage total all season long. Now, have they faced an offense as potent as Dallas? No, that's totally true. But we also don't know how committed immediately Kellen Moore is going to be to the pass with Andy Dalton under center, noting that Ezekiel Elliott is a pretty good running back and the offensive line is wildly banged up. So I like Andy Dalton, but over 300 yards, I'm going to take the under.
Matt, are you firing the Andy Dalton finger guns?
Pew, pew.
Oh, sure. They might want to establish the run. They can't establish the run. It doesn't matter what they want to do or what high-flying media personalities. They just want to default on that bit of analysis. They're like, oh yeah, they'll want to. Now it's time to get back to the roots with Zeke. No, they can't do it. Not with that defense. Give me the over on this one. If Dak was averaging 400 passing yards per game, we can give a bit of a Dalton adjustment here and take it down to 300. That's easy. Give me the over here. Sure.
There it is. Tie is broken. Dalton, a fantasy starter in week 6.
You know what time it is. What it do, baby? It's your boy T-Money with the value plays for my DFS week 6 lineup. At quarterback, I'm going with my man Ryan Tannehill at $28. Now, I almost hit y'all with that Captain Kirk Cousins, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't put that evil on y'all on Sunday morning. Couldn't do that for you. But Tannehill has been balling. Dude's been using his legs. He's already run for a couple touchdowns, throwing for multiple touchdowns per game. Now he has a matchup against the Houston Texans, which plays pretty tough against, quarterbacks. They give up the 15 most points in fantasy points to quarterbacks, but at the same time, I expect this game to be a snooky shootout, snooky and sneaky, and I expect my boy Tannehill to ball out. So make sure you plug him into your lineup. Now, at running back, I'm going with the man, Alexander Mattison, going against that Falcons. We know that the Falcons always give up bunches of points to fantasy running backs, either in the run game or as pass catchers out of the backfield. Mattison is only $14. That man Dalvin Cook is out. They give up the 6th most points to fantasy running backs, and I expect this dude to eat all day. And at wide receiver, I'm running it back with another Viking, Justin Jefferson. Now, I wasn't down on the cat last week. I just expected him to go for 100 yards. Now, this week, I'm expecting this dude to go for over 100 yards. Now, this dude was riding high like a Tesla stock a couple weeks ago. But after that stock split, eventually got to come down. But now my man about to rise back up. I expect the dude, Captain Kirk, to target this dude heavily. The Falcons matchup is magically delicious. And I just expect all these dudes to ball out. I should have Kirk Cousins in this as well, but we already know how I feel about Captain Kirk. Not going to do that to you, but the matchup is good for him. If you feel like rolling the dice, you could probably do it, but I wouldn't play that role. Now at tight end, we got to talk about my man, Zach Ertz, Stanford tight end. $16 going against the Baltimore Ravens. Now I know my man Andy Barons was hating on him all day already, but this dude got to get off the struggle bus at some point. He's one of the most heavily targeted tight ends. We already had this dude Fulgham ball out. Now, at least they got a presence on the outside. Miles Sanders balled out at the running back position, catching balls, running for deep, for long touchdowns. So I feel that with some other guys playing around him, playing up, that may open up some space for Zach Ertz to get off against the Baltimore Ravens team that has given up the 13 most points to fantasy tight ends. So plug these dudes into your lineup because the T is for the money, and the money is something that you won't have if you don't have them in your lineup. So now, producer Dan, go ahead and throw up those standards and show everyone why they should listen to me, because your boy is still in first. The man with the best hair on the internet has creeped up into second place, but he's still a ways back. But I'll go ahead and let y'all talk about what y'all gonna try to do to catch up with your boy.
I mean, I'm coming. Look at that. I'm coming. I'm only a couple points out of fourth place. That's something. It seems to me that I checked in last Sunday and there was a big fat 0 next to Tank's score, I believe, in a newbie move. Forgot to set the lineup.
That.
What's going on there?
Hey, I mean, I can show you the lineup that I sent to the producer where we were only 5 minutes into the game. I mean, actually, I can take a 0 for last week and still beat y'all trying to say you really want me to do it. I'm willing to do it.
Well, you kind of are if you're starting early.
Nothing to say?
I think we should all maybe just move ahead and let Andy and Tank take this offline. There's still time to get in on the action in the new Yahoo Cup BetMGM Daily Contest. Enter every week for a chance at $75,000 in total prizes, and the top 25 lineups each week will be entered in the Yahoo Cup BetMGM Final, where you could win free rooms from MGM Resorts or a $20,000 Vegas getaway. Head to yahoo.com/dailyfantasy to join. Welcome to Fantasy Football Live, Miss Casey Kasem. Thank you for being part of this week's fantasy community segment. I don't know if everybody is as familiar with your work, or you, because we are friends IRL. So I wanted to give you this opportunity to tell everyone what you're about, where you work, where they can find it. Give it to us.
Okay, if I have to go through my resume, I will. You can find me on Twitter at @BKCKasem. I write for the Fantasy Footballers. I also write for Fighting Chance Fantasy, and I'm over with the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. Yes.
All right. And do any of your articles for these various outlets have a particular slant or specialty?
Yeah, so over with the Footballers, I'm doing the starts of the week. That comes out on Thursdays, Fridays. And then with Fighting Chance Fantasy, I am doing the Hail Mary plays, and I usually get those out on Saturdays. And it's just basically players to pick up if you're like in a big bind.
All right, so you've got starts of the week and Hail Mary starts. So I think it's time we got started.
Hey!
And along those lines, I wanted to ask you what your favorite safe start for week 6 might be.
Okay, for me, it might not be safe for everybody, but for me, the guy that popped out to me was Ryan Fitzpatrick. Yeah, he might not seem safe because he's not really the sexy name. He's not really the guy that is on everybody's radar, but he's passed for over 300 yards 3 times this season. He has Devontae Parker there that's been lighting it up ever since he came back from injury. And if you're in a situation like me where Dak is gone and Russ is on bye, then you're going to need somebody, and I think that he's the safest.
Yeah, I think in 2020, a YOLO style of play absolutely means that someone is safe. So give me your Hail Mary start for week 6 then.
My guy this week is going to be Cedric Wilson. He's been involved for 3 weeks straight. He had a huge game against Seattle. He's not a sexy play. I wouldn't start him unless I was in a desperate situation, but he plays Monday night. So if something happens over the weekend and you have to grab somebody, you might not get a ton of points off of him, but it's better than 0.
That's an interesting play, because the thing I've liked about Wilson is that Kellen Moore was using him in creative ways, like, throwing a touchdown pass to Dak Prescott before Prescott was obviously injured, right? One more follow-up. Because Cedric Wilson, I mean, that is a Hail Mary play.
That is a Hail Mary play.
Would you, I'm thinking about other, like, high ceiling type plays. Would you rank these 3 players in order of most wanting to start to least desired start? Cedric Wilson, Gabriel Davis on the Buffalo Bills, or McCole Hardman, noting that Sammy Watkins is banged up?
McCole Hardman would be my number 1. And then the other 2 are so close to me. I probably would put Cedric Wilson second.
Ooh, over Gabriel Davis. We are gonna have a side wager about that.
And it's not because I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm not being over. It's just like, I don't know. I do feel like the opportunity that he has there is going to be, I think it's going to continue to be creative.
I will say that you are never shy about your picks. You always own your picks, and you have lots of thought behind them. So I want everyone to make sure they're following you and your work. Tell us one more time what your social handles are.
Follow me on Twitter over at BKCKasem. That'd be really cool. You guys can find me on the Fantasy Footballers. I just started writing over there. I am also writing over with Fighting Chance Fantasy. So look out for those articles we were talking about. And I'm also potting over with the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network.
Follow her. She's the best. Although she's wrong about Gabriel Davis.
Oh, we'll see.
We'll get to it later. Let's check back in on Twitter for some more viewer questions at the hashtag AskFFL. All right, this one starts with Fernando.
Welcome to
Who should I
Fantasy
start in my flex? Chase Claypool, Odell Beckham Jr., or Devonta Freeman versus Washington? Andy, tell me why Chase Claypool is not the answer, because I think he is.
No, I can't tell you that. Chase Claypool is the answer for me. I don't think that was like some outlier performance that we got last week. Like, that was Chase Claypool stepping up and basically becoming Pittsburgh's #1 receiver. I think there's a non-trivial chance that by the end of the year, he is their clear #1. He has all the athletic traits you could possibly want in a wide receiver, and they show up on the field. They've been manufacturing touches for him all year. Now he's just a star. Now he's going to get plenty of workload. I think he's a fantastic play this week and rest of season.
Minty, you join us from Vegas, so we've got a Raiders-specific question for you from Andrew. Do you think the Raiders will stay hot coming off their victory versus the Chiefs?
I actually think they'll go through a little slump playing the Bucks, I think, next week, and then the Browns also, and then I think they play the Chargers too. So I can see them going through a slump and then getting hot again. But the real question is, can they beat the Chiefs again outright? So I would definitely bet on the Raiders more than I would fade them, but I would be very cautious because I treat this like a new team.
Also, let's not forget, the Raiders are on bye, so don't worry. Josh Jacobs is not supposed to be in your lineup this week. I know. Matt, this last question is for you. It's from Laura. James Robinson versus Detroit. Chase Claypool, another Chase Claypool question versus the Browns, or Robbie Anderson versus the victorious Chicago Bears. Which one for the flex in a PPR?
First of all, Laura, well done on working the waiver wire. Like, all three of those were like the hottest pickup of the week at various points of the season. You're on top of things. That's great. My pick here, though, is James Robinson. I think there's some volatility, obviously, more so at the wide receiver position than at the running back position. Like, we can lock in James Robinson for touches. He's been that dude in the Jaguars offense. The Lions, give me a break. Matt Patricia, that defense, they don't know what they're doing over there. They can't really rush the passers. They can't really stop the run. I think there'll be plenty of both rushing and receiving opportunities for James Robinson. Whereas I like Chase Claypool a lot this week. I think Robbie Anderson might slow down just a little bit against that Bears defense. So give me James Robinson, though, over these other two options. And again, well done on that waiver.
All right, man. Anything new cooking in the chat? Any new emojis?
Oh, yeah. Christopher Schroeder, and, by the way, nice guy Christopher also said welcome to Casey on the show. What a guy, Chris. And so I'm gonna answer your question, also because you've got the bang emoji, you've got a bunch of jack-o'-lanterns, the scream little emoji thing, I guess. That's awesome. You got Cam Newton or Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. I'm gonna go with Cam Newton in this spot. I like Fitzpatrick. Obviously, everybody likes Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you don't like Ryan Fitzpatrick, you're an actual lunatic. But at the same time, Cam Newton coming off a lot of downtime for Cam. It's been quite some time since we've seen Cam Newton going against the Broncos defense that has their problems, that has injury issues. I mean, the whole Broncos team has issues up and down the roster. I still think Cam is the play here. Also, interesting question from Mark Peterson. Mark, I think you've jumped the shark just a little bit here. Got the blush emoji, the siren emoji, a personal favorite, obviously, as I say every week. The football emoji, Amari Cooper or Christian Kirk. Now, I wanted to talk about this one just for 1 second because you can play Amari Cooper, all right? It's going to be fine. The Cardinals cornerbacks are not good, Patrick Peterson included. Like, if you're still bringing up, like, oh, he might be shadowed by Patrick Peterson, I think you're still living back in, like, 2018. Come back to here in 2020, where this whole Cardinals defense has not been very good from a secondary perspective. They're giving up some plays there. But I still like Christian Kirk. Like, if you have another spot on your lineup, you can maybe get Christian Kirk involved because the Cardinals need to get someone else besides DeAndre Hopkins involved. And hey, why not against this Dallas Cowboys defense?
All right, it's time to take a break here on Fantasy Football Live, but don't forget, Yahoo was rated the best fantasy sports app by the Fantasy Sports Gaming Association in 2019. Check out this week's top fantasy pickups and award-winning insight on the Yahoo Fantasy app today. When Fantasy Football Live returns, we'll slide into our own DMs and answer some more roster questions. We are back here on Fantasy Football Live. 9 games getting ready to kick off here at the top of the hour. Let's check in on our own social feeds and see what folks want to know. Andy, who's asking you what?
Yeah, mine is mostly a bunch of people asking about McCole Hardman or Laviska Shenault, both of whom we like. So I want to look at this question from Matt. It's actually a suggestion, and he tagged an awful lot of fantasy experts on this, but he's saying, wish list, can you make trade data from your platforms available to players? Seems like it might be relatively easy and very beneficial to let users see trades completed for a certain player. Matt, we do this. This is there. This is in the game. Maybe you should spend a little time at the research tab in your Yahoo Fantasy League, because there's a lot of good stuff there. You go to research, go to trade market, and you can look up any player by their name, and you can quickly find every multiplayer deal, every one-for-one deal involving that guy. I was just looking at Le'Veon Bell trades earlier today. This is already in the game. We have it. Also, fantasy points against is in there. MVPs are in there. There's a lot of good stuff under the research tab. So browse it. Get to know it. Your friend.
Browse it. Get to know it. Tank, you're my friend. Who's asking you questions, though?
Yeah, I got a tweet coming in from King Primetime 21 asking me, he says he has Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp, Jamison Crowder, A.J. Brown, needs 3 of those. Which one to play? Like, I think for me, even though, you know, people want to look at them as the sexy names, but A.J. Brown and Crowder, given the matchups and their target share on their rosters, I think that they're automatic plays for me. So then it comes down between Chris Godwin and Cooper Kupp. And I just look at it, if Godwin's healthy, you're really looking at him splitting the red zone targets with Mike Evans. And that's pretty much it. Where with Cooper Kupp, you have to worry about Robert Woods, you have to worry about the run game, you have to worry about Jared Goff doing some crazy stuff, you have to worry about Higbee and those other tight ends. So with the narrow target share, I'll lean Godwin over Kupp. So Godwin, A.J. Brown, Jamison Crowder.
Oh, Mint, you're going to have to answer this next one, because I can't believe that we are living in a world where Cooper Kupp is being sat and Jamison Crowder is being started. I just need to take a minute to breathe through that one.
All right, well, I've got a question from Matt, and he asks, do the Jets shock the world? Should I take them on the money line? There always seems to be a big underdog each week. He is to find the one. Last week was the Raiders. What do you think? Well, I don't think the Jets shock the world, especially against this hot Dolphins team. If they do, though, I will be messaging you, Matt, for picks. But I think the best underdog upset would be the Cowboys, like I said earlier, and maybe even the Bengals against the Colts. Those are my 2 underdog upsets.
Whoa, an underdog upset by way of the Cowboys. My question is about the Cowboys. Another Andy Dalton question I got off of Instagram. The power of Crex compels you. I love that. Wants to know, Andy Dalton or Ryan Tannehill. How is this difficult? Like, I can't believe we're sitting here and I'm like, oh, well, I have those 2 players very close in my rankings. The over-unders on these 2 prospective games are also pretty close. Ultimately, however, I'm going with the quarterback that has perhaps the best trio of pass catchers. You could say quadruplet, whatever 5 is. I don't remember. High school was a bit ago. I wasn't good at math. So I'm going to go with Andy Dalton in this one over Ryan Tannehill, but it is sneakily difficult. All right, keep those tweets coming in. Our Scott Pianowski, by the way, is still answering questions at the hashtag AskFFL all the way up until kickoff.
All right, time for another round of fantasy face-offs. This is where we look at pairs of players who are similarly ranked and we debate their merits. We're going to start with a pair of wide receivers, and it's tough. I've actually got these guys really close. It's Juju Smith-Schuster. That's where Liz is siding. I'm going to go with the great Jamison Crowder. Liz, give us the argument for Juju.
I mean, Matt had a mind blow emoji in relation to Juju earlier, and this is where I'm here. I can't do it. I'm not going to sit Juju Smith-Schuster in favor of Jamison Crowder. What a damn insult. I get it. An ADOT of 5.0. That's not great. And it hasn't topped 60 yards since week 1. Okay, fine. But Deontay Johnson, we're talking about in relation to Chase Claypool all the time. That also helps the target volume for Juju. And I like the matchup here against the Browns, who are pretty leaky versus the slot. So please give me Juju.
Listen, anytime you can get Joe Flacco's #1 receiver, you have to do it. How can you say no? Jamison Crowder so far this year has played 3 games, and he is the wide receiver 3 overall on a per game basis. That's where we are. That's 2020 for you. 100+ yards in every game, at least 7 catches in every game, double-digit targets in every game. He gets a matchup this week with Miami. They allow 8.3 yards per pass attempt. They rank number 21 against the pass. Like, there's no way Crowder on this volume is going to face plant. Not this time. Okay, we're going to look at a pair of tight ends now, and death is not an option in this matchup. It's Hayden Hurst. It is Austin Hooper, and I will give you the argument for Austin Hooper. Admittedly, maybe you're not loving either one of these players, but Hooper, last 2 games, has seen 17 targets. He's caught 10 of them. If they're going to do anything at all against Pittsburgh this week, it is going to be through the air. You can barely run the ball at all against Pittsburgh. So I think that is where I would have to lean here. And then you look at the wideouts for the Browns. They're banged up right now. Jarvis Landry and Odell both dealing with injuries.
Okay, I mean, what a buffet of tasty options. Do you want the stale croissant or the ice-cold oatmeal? My gosh. Is Hayden Hurst touchdown dependent? Yeah, absolutely. Also, he's top 5 in routes, and he's regularly getting deep looks. Matt Ryan tries to get him in the end zone. Matt Ryan needs a safety blanket. That should be, especially with Julio Jones, not at 100%. Hayden Hurst, I just can't get behind Hooper, who is like 3rd or 4th. On a run-first offense facing the Steelers. No, thank you. This has got to be Hurst.
Yeah, Liz is actually probably right about this one. My rank on Hurst this week is kind of a hate rank, gotta admit.
All right, let's jump into Make Your Pick, answer the flex questions of the thirsty social media folks out there. And I get to do it with Tank Williams again. Tank, we're vibing here on this one. We got a bunch of segments together. Yeah. Let's help out the people, starting with Kevin. We got to pick 2 here of clearly another waiver wire wonder lineup on this one. Keelan Cole, Travis Fulgham, or Chase Edmonds. Which way are you going on this one, Tank?
I think Fulgham is a given just for the simple fact that this dude's been balling out. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's that #1 option for the Eagles in the pass game. And when you look at Keelan Cole, you have DJ Chark coming back. You have Shenault that's in the picture. I'd rather go with Chase Edmonds. I like Andy's theory where, they're going to be playing in the high-scoring matchup against the Cowboys. He's been the pass-catching option out of the backfield for the Cardinals, so I'll lean Edmonds in that one.
Yeah, I think the Cardinals-Cowboys game is pretty much like get everybody in the pool. Like any Cowboys, any Cardinals you got in your lineup, get them in there. You want to have those guys starting. And I'm with you. Travis Fulgham's kind of legit. I think even when Jalen Reagor gets back, I'm sick of the whole Deshaun Jackson, will he, won't he? Who cares? I think Travis Fulgham has probably passed him up at this point anyways. Let's move on to our next tweet here from Albert. Albert asks us, Devontae Parker, DJ Moore, Laviska Shenault, T. Higgins. We got to pick 2 veterans, 2 rookies. I think you go with Devontae Parker. He's cooking. He's playing pretty well right now, scoring touchdowns, going over 100 yards every now and again. Healthy. We love it. Fitzpatrick is flying. I'm going with Parker there for sure. And then give me Shenault for the 2nd spot. I know this might be aggressive going with him over DJ Moore, but really just like the game environment between Detroit and Jacksonville. I think more points are going to be scored in that game. These defenses do not stop anyone. And look, the Panthers' pass defense right now has been pretty underrated. The Bears can't score a bunch of points anyways. I don't think there's going to be a lot of point opportunities in that one. Tank, am I crazy for starting Shenault over Moore there?
No, I think you make a lot of good points. We talked about DJ Moore earlier. He had a really nice setup last week against the Falcons, and he took advantage of it. This week, he has one of the tougher matchups on the fantasy slate going against that Bears secondary. He's not the #1 option in Carolina, and I feel like that may be a low-scoring affair, especially when you compare it to what we could potentially get out of a Lions-Jacksonville shootout. So I think you're right on the money with Shenault.
Yeah, no doubt. Moore only had 5 targets last week. That is not what you want, even if it was a line.
Let's switch gears and talk last-minute sleepers who could do some fantasy damage. This week, I'm starting with a receiver, and I am very excited to finally talk about Gabriel Davis because I think he's in a matchup where he can see some real downfield shots. I mean, this is a guy who has emerged as a legit downfield and red zone weapon for Josh Allen. He has scored in weeks 2 and 4, cleared 80 yards in week 3. John Brown is active for this game, but he has been in and out of the lineup working through injury. When I look at the over-under on this one, 57.5 versus the Chiefs, and I think about Josh Allen uncorking, I think about Gabriel Davis catching a touchdown. He almost had one if it were not for a penalty last week. So I think he is a nice, dart throw, high ceiling option that we have yet to discuss today. Also, Andy and I talked about Austin Hooper and Hayden Hurst. Blah. How about Irv Smith? Why have we not discussed Irv Smith, who last week emerged as the Vikings' third option in the passing game? Now, does that mean a lot for the Vikings? Well, it does when he managed to catch 2 key plays over 20 yards. He announced himself as a receiving threat for the first time since entering the NFL, and we have to look at the matchup and say, oh my gosh, against the Falcons, this is fantastic. Atlanta is giving up the second most fantasy points to the tight end position and the most touchdowns. So go ahead and feel comfortable flexing Irv Smith. We are inching ever closer to kickoff here on Fantasy Football Live. When we come back, we'll get as many roster questions as we can. BRB. Just like Planters peanuts are the crunchy snacks you crave on game day, we're here to get you the lineup advice you need to secure a Week 5 victory with just a few minutes to kick off. Let's head back to our social channels for one last check on viewer questions and make some crave-worthy picks presented by Planters. Our first tweet comes from Ashley, and she wants to know, should I start Laviska Shenault or Cole Beasley in my flex, and why is the answer Laviska Shenault? Tank, do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about Shenault already. I mean, with DJ Chark coming off an injury, I think he should be that #1 option in the Jacksonville passing game. He had 8 targets last week. When you look at the Buffalo game, I mean, I kind of like that setup just because I expected it to be a shootout. Buffalo coming off a tough loss, going against that high-powered Kansas City offense. But there's too many weapons there in Buffalo. Diggs is going to be the guy, and so I would lean towards Shenault, and hopefully he makes me right.
I agree with you. Minty, we got one for you, and it is from Kyle. He wants to know, how many points are you typically giving for home field this year? Does it vary based on fans in the stands or not? Thank you.
Truly, I don't think there's much home field advantage unless you're facing an opponent that is traveling from a different time zone. I'm only giving 1.5 points of home field advantage for teams that have fans in the stands instead of the normal 3. So, you know what? We've seen a lot of road favorites win lately, so I really, again, don't think there's much home field advantage here this season.
Okay, Matt, we have a question from another Matt, and he wants to know if he should start DJ Chark or Justin Jefferson. We just talked about that matchup against the Falcons, so what say you?
Yeah, I like Justin Jefferson here. You know, at this point, DJ Chark was so much of like a game time decision, highly questionable coming in. I think his presence is really important for the entire passing offense, like for all this Laviska Shenault love. And, you know, Gardner Minshew still having a good game. I think he matters in that perspective. We've seen what happens when he's not in the lineup. But right now, Justin Jefferson is healthy. He's in a great matchup. As long as Kirk Cousins cooperates, actually, you know what? As long as Matt Ryan cooperates, this game should be very high scoring between the Vikings and the Falcons. Give me Jefferson in this one going against that Falcons secondary. I don't think Raheem Morris is bringing back the Youngry enthusiasm of Days Bowl.
Okay, we have another one. This one is from Chad. He has to fill his flex spot with either Odell Beckham Jr., oh my gosh, Jamison Crowder, or Myles Gaskin. We haven't had any Myles Gaskin. Look at that hot, sexy Jets-Dolphins matchup. Andy, you love Jamison Crowder so much. Are you starting him in favor, ahead of OBJ or Myles Gaskin?
Yeah, you know what's funny here is that OBJ is like the also ran in this question for me.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit ding this week. This actually comes down to Gaskin or Jamison Crowder. And again, we know Crowder's volume has been there all season, but in this case, I would actually lean Gaskin. I expect this to be a game where there's almost no chance that it gets out of hand for Miami. So the run is going to be in play all day. When Gaskin, when his team is ahead, Gaskin is like the only back that they use. They lean on him really heavy. We've seen him now convert at the goal line. So Gaskin is sort of all systems go for me. I think he's 20+ touches this week.
Matt, we have a quarterback question that I want to send your way. It's from Clay, and he wants to know if he should start Deshaun Watson or Ryan Tannehill. Sending it to you because obviously people are beginning to respect, per your request, the Titans passing game here.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with Tannehill in this spot. I like both quarterbacks this week. I think you can mix and match. If you're making a couple of daily fantasy lineups, you can, throw in Watson in some with the Texans stack. You could throw in Tannehill in some with a A.J. Brown stack, run it back with some Texans, whatever. You can have a lot of fun with this game, but straight up, I think Ryan Tannehill is the better bet here because he's facing that Houston defense that there's no exercising any demons over there that can save that defense. I think you can save the Texans offense getting Bill O'Brien out the door, but none's saving that Texas defense. That's a bad unit.
All right, Matt, why don't we keep it on you and let's get more questions out of the chat. What's going on there?
Yeah, one question I really like, and I'm going to ask Andy on this one too after I give my input, because Andy, he's a sobering guy. He really keeps you centered, grounded, all that good stuff. Ryan Sparks wants to know, and he sent in the jack-o'-lantern, a ghost, even a robot emoji. Yeah, that's great stuff. With the siren, of course, fan favorite, obviously. Full PPR, need one flex here. Terry McLaurin, Travis Fulgham, or Brandon Cooks. Now, I'm a Terry McLaurin guy, Andy Behrens. We know that. And I think Kyle Allen starting at quarterback is actually the best thing among this carousel of bad passers for Terry McLaurin's fantasy outlook. But going against James Bradbury, tough matchup. Am I wrong to still go with Terry McLaurin in this debate of guys who have been producing recently?
No, you're certainly not wrong. We know that volume's going to be there for McLaurin. He is the clear number one, and no one else is close to him on that team. I think that Kyle Allen is good enough to support like one viable fantasy receiver, and that is clearly going to be McLaurin. I think he's in a different tier from the rest of these guys.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think you can lock in much more projectable volume his way. That's for. Let's take one more here from Devin from Facebook, and we've got jack-o'-lanterns and we've got beer. Hey, what's better in fall than a good, nice carved jack-o'-lantern and some booze down the old gullet? DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, or Julian Edelman? Hey, we've talked enough about Jags receivers, all right? Julian Edelman is the play here. Cam Newton is back. Don't trust anything that the Broncos have going on in the secondary there from a slot defense perspective. Like, let's not forget Julian Edelman. It feels like 1,000 years ago because we had to watch Brian Hoyer and Garrett Stidham. But Julian Edelman had his most yards in his career ever in a game when Cam Newton was playing quarterback back in week 2. Again, 1,000 years ago, it feels like, but not that long indeed. I think Julian Edelman, even in a non-PPR format here, is your guy in this spot.
Remember, be sure to remember things like to go. Be sure to have Planter snacks on hand all season long and keep up with Peanut Jr. on social media at Mr. Peanut. Before we go, let's get some final thoughts from everyone. Andy, which situations or players are you monitoring?
You know, I'm not going to recommend that people actually watch the Giants-Washington game, but I just want to point out that Daniel Jones has not thrown a touchdown pass in any of the last 4 weeks. And for any of those Giants fantasy assets to be viable rest of season, like, he's got to do something at some point. I can't believe this has happened, but he hasn't thrown a TD pass since week 1.
All right, and Matt, what about you?
You know, I love my job, and I have a, interesting relationship with fantasy football. Sometimes it's love, sometimes it's hate. But sometimes when we do these fantasy shows, it's like, man, we spent all this time talking about Laviska Shenault and McCole Hardman, and I feel like we barely talked about the fact that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are facing off today. I want to watch that game. I'm almost thankful that the NFL has packed this early game schedule to the point that it's like my choice in the afternoon is Brady v. Rodgers in a great game with the Packers leading the NFL in points per drive, or the Jets and Dolphins. Sometimes life lines up pretty well for me.
Tank, which matchup are you keeping an eye on?
Man, I got my ISO cam on Rams Niners because we have two defenses that have been friendly to fantasy quarterbacks, yet at the same time, we have a couple coaches who almost have to kind of babysit their quarterbacks and don't really unleash them because they have to protect them. So I want to see which quarterbacks we're going to see out of Jared Goff and Jimmy Garoppolo. Are those guys going to lean heavily on the run game to protect them from making mistakes, or are they going to have the shootout that we all want and desire? So that's why I'm focusing on that game tonight.
Minty, are you hoping for any particular trends to show up this week?
You know what? I'm actually looking forward to seeing how Andy Dalton fares against the Cardinals. I'm also looking to see if the Bengals can, produce some points against this Colts team here. They're big underdogs here, and I'm interested to see how Joe Burrow is going to do.
Oh, I can't wait to see Brashad Perriman totally tilt all your Jamison Crowder love in his dynamic, heroic return since week 2 in the other, as Matt mentioned, matchup in the afternoon. That is where it's at. That's going to do it for this edition of Fantasy Football Live. Thanks for kicking off your NFL Sunday with us. Remember, you can connect with us all week long on the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast. That's our podcast. Mad Bets daily on Yahoo Sports, and of course back here every Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. Good luck to all your fantasy teams in Week 6, and we will see you next Sunday for more Jamison Crowder questions.